He played varsity. He played varsity football. He led the team in state in rushing, and at one point he led the nation in rushing. He got elected to the Super Subway team and got first team All-State honors. He was invited to a Nike opening camp twice. One season he rushed over 7,000 yards. He had 80 touchdowns. And in his freshman year, he did second in the nation in touchdowns, and he earned second team all conference in 2022 in Conference USA. So we are pleased to announce our guest speaker, Deion Hankins.
Thank you so much. How you guys doing tonight? Everyone good? Okay, so I wanted to open it up with a verse. This verse is found in James, first chapter of James, verse 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So with that said, I feel like my whole life was just trials and tribulations. My whole life I had to persevere, I had to fight. You know, from a young age, you know, growing up in El Paso, in my area, I was like one of the only colored kids, and we were like the only like colored family. And me being black and Mexican, I'm obviously like, I look more black than Mexican, you know, so me and my siblings, we kind of got picked on, you know, at a young age. We went to Dowell Elementary, and we would get called names and stuff like that, and that kind of just fueled me and fueled a fire within me to be a better person and to change and be a leader. And you know, around my area, I didn't really have any influential people except for my family. Those are the ones who I looked up to. I looked up to my uncles, I looked up to my mom, because I saw the strength that they had within them. And from a young age, I got taught about Christ, and my relationship with God only grew from there. And through those trials and tribulations that my family went through, that's how my relationship with Christ got stronger. And so as time went on, my mom, she wanted me to play City League football. I was only like 7 years old, and I was scared because like I was bigger than the other kids, so I didn't want to like hurt them or anything. So I would just be like, oh no, I'm sick. So the coach would just like come to my house and, you know, try to get me to, you know, come to the practices and stuff, but I wouldn't. So ever since that time, I just was playing like street football and stuff like that, just street sports with my friends and all that. And I realized how talented I was in that area. And I would still be getting like picked on and stuff like that. So that just motivated me to start working out. So in 5th grade, I started working out. I started doing push-ups, I started doing pull-ups, everything that I can, just so I can, you know, have a release of what I was dealing with. And I really didn't have like that open door that I can go to, which is Christ, because I didn't really know much about how to come to him at that age. So I would go to my uncle Joe's house, and he introduced me to, you know, some videos where it would talk about music, how the devil uses music to influence the people. And this music was just like talking about like the Illuminati and all this stuff. So after that, I went straight to my house and I started like looking for Christian music. I downloaded Andy Mineo, Lecrae, all of them. And that was kind of like where my walk with God started. And so after that, 7th grade year came, and my mom, she bought me my first Bible. And my first Bible, it was green. It had a gray covering, gray backing, and it had my name inscribed on the bottom corner. And so my mom handed it to me, and she was like, okay, if you want to be great, if you want to be good at football and good at whatever you do in life, you must give all glory and honor to God. So I was like, okay. So from that time on, I started reading my Bible, started reading stories that I'd never heard before. I started reading about, you know, how Jesus came and died for me. You know, I was young, I was reading that, I'm like, man, like that's powerful. And I wanted to take it, I wanted to see how far that God could take me. So from that time on, I started praying, reading, just devoting my time to him. prayed and read before every game and stuff like that. So my first year, I was good. Like I had a good season, but the only thing is, I played that season with a cast on because the first game that I played, I actually broke my forearm, and I'm like, man, like the trial's already starting, and it's like only my first game. So I went to the doctor. He said I might have to sit out the whole season, but then I'm just like, nah. So I ended up just playing with a cast covering the whole year, and just then was kind of like one of God's first representations of his strength, because I understood that when I was weak, God was strong in that moment. So I started playing and had a successful 7th grade season. 8th grade year came along, and I'm just like, okay, like I have experience under my belt and stuff, but I still need to grow in my relationship with God. And so my cousin Lexis, she took me to youth nights at Ignite Movement, which is in the far east side. And we used to go to Ignite Movement every Friday before our games, because our games were on Saturday. And so those youth nights, I seen so many people just worshiping God. I seen them praising, dancing. I felt the Holy Spirit in me. I'm just like, okay, like I want that same thing. So I just, gave my time. I started pouring more time into it. And then one day, one of my mentors told me, like, okay, so we want you to take a step of faith. So we want you to go during your lunchtime, stand on top of a table, and start preaching about God. I'm like, I'm not about to do all that. Like, that's just way too much. So instead of doing that during my lunchtime, I went, sat at a table. I started talking to my friends around me in that table about God. Started talking to them about Christ and his sacrifice and stuff. Eventually, we brought that outside, and there was like trees by the basketball court. We would gather there every day and bring our Bibles and just have Bible studies. And these Bible studies started small, but they eventually got bigger, because we were teaching kids about the stuff that we learned at youth nights, about the stuff that we learned at our own Bible studies. So eventually, these Bible studies were just like getting so big and out of hand, so the teachers would look through their window and they'll see like, is there like a fight going on? They would think like a fight was going on, but it was just like us preaching God's word under a tree. So the teachers would come and listen to us talk about God. And eventually they gave us a room where we shared the word and we shared teachings and testimonies and stuff. And we had brought different people, like we brought like rap artists, like Christian rap artists into the school and stuff at a young age. And we would have pizza and gather every Wednesday at lunch. And this was before I knew about FCA or anything. I didn't know about FCA, I didn't know about Youth for Christ or anything. So this was just me trusting in my spirit and relying on God's way and allowing him to show me the way to go. So I followed my spirit during that time. And so, like he said, when he introduced me that year, I played my first year on the Raiders, and we won Little Bowl champions, and we went undefeated and stuff like that. So after that, my freshman year came, and I'm like, okay, they're talking to me about going to varsity as a freshman, but I'm just a little scared. I'm like a little nervous, which is normal for somebody my age. I was 14 at the time, 14, 15 at the time. And so we had these little Bible studies on every Monday called HOP, House of Peace, at Ignite Youth. And so one time I was just like, man, I'm playing JV right now because they didn't let me play freshman. They wanted me to play varsity, but I was too nervous. So I just ended up sticking with JV for the majority of the season. So the last 4 games, they were talking to me about like moving me up. I'm like, okay. And I was nervous. So during that Bible study, I'm like, God, like just talk to me. At the end of the service or at the end of the study, they're like, okay, just sit there, relax, be still, and we're gonna have a moment of silence and allow God to speak through you, allow him to speak to you. So at that moment, I heard God say, I am a God of no limits. The same thing I can do with you in middle school, I can do with you in high school, I can do with you in college. Wherever you go, I am a God of no limits. So I'm like, okay, God, like, you're right. Like, you are who I placed my faith in, and I'm gonna run with it. So I went, I moved up, and the last 4 games, I finished off with like 400 yards on like 40 something carries, and I scored in each one of those games that I played in. And I'm like, okay, God, like, this is a result of your work, and this is a result of me trusting in you. And so that next season, we had a whole new coaching staff and stuff. So they brought things like boot camp, and they brought things like, leadership meetings and all this stuff. So that's what really like grew my faith, and that's what really like where the trials and stuff began to occur for me to exercise my faith. And so at that time, we were actually hitting with no pads on and just a mouthpiece. Every practice we would just be hitting. We didn't have no turf. We had like just dirt and stickers and stuff. So we'll just be, practicing like that. But by the time the season came around, I'm like, okay, God, like here we go. So at that time, I was rushing for 200 yards one game, 300 yards, 300, 200. And then somebody came up to me and they're like, hey, did you know you're leading the state in rushing right now? And I'm just like, oh, I didn't even know they kept tracking yards or anything. I was just running, because, I was just running. I wasn't thinking about technique or anything. I didn't really catch up with all that stuff. So at that time, I was like, okay. So I just kept going. And then as time went on and as the season went on, the pressure started to come. And I'm like, man, they're pulling me out of class so I can sign autographs at a table. They're like, oh, can we see Deion Hankins? And went outside. They had a table set up for me so I could sign autographs. And I was only a sophomore. I was only like 15, 16 years old. My offers and stuff started coming in and stuff like that. And after that, I just continued. I continued up until like junior year. I ended up having my first major injury, which was an MCL tear, which, I had to stay out 3 games. And that kind of like shook my faith, because I realized that, I can't do anything on my own strength. Like, it's solely by God's strength, and it's solely by His will in which I'm able to perform. And I still finished my senior year and my high school career off on a good foot. And at one point, I was #1 rusher in the nation at one point, But although I had all these offers and stuff, I feel like God was telling me to go a different way, due to the fact that, I was going to commit to Arkansas at the time. So I called the coach on the phone, and I was just like, hey man, I want to come up and commit. So he's like, nah, like you're going to have to commit in person. So I went, and we were taking pictures, doing all this stuff. And he told me, he's like, oh, okay, we actually have another running back that already committed. So I was like, oh snap, I just drove 14 hours, to commit here. So that didn't end up working out. And so I came, checked out my other offers, and the doors kind of like closed on me, like they all got committed up. But then I'm like, God, like, is it something that I've done? It's like, I kind of had like a Job moment, where like Job was like, God, like all this pressure, all this calamity, all these things are happening to me is like something that I've done. And I'm like, I heard God say, it's not by your strength, but it's by my strength. Would you rather you make your name great somewhere else, or make my name great here? If God could feed the multitudes with a couple fish and a couple loaves of bread and still have some left over, whatever you put in His hand, He is able to multiply. He is able to produce. It's like an investment. If you put it into the kingdom, then God's gonna give it back. So that's what I was thinking. If God could use a man like Moses, who was a murderer, if God could use him to free the Israelites out of captivity, if God could use Joseph, who went through, from the pit to the palace, and he was betrayed, backstabbed and stuff, if God could use them, He could use me in the same way. If God could use 300 soldiers to go out and conquer, I thought about the same thing. Okay, I'm at a small school, I'm at UTEP, but I'm gonna put on for your name. I'm gonna represent your name, God. And that's been my goal ever since, is to represent God's name and represent His kingdom to the best of my ability. And coming into college, I was physically tough, but as far as the mental side of everything, I was not all there mentally. I was having mess ups and stuff in practice and all this stuff. And my old coach, he told me, he's like, whenever you go on that field, whenever we put you in and give you a chance, the pastor's gonna see why you're not playing. They're gonna see, and your God's not gonna be with you, your family's not gonna be with you, your mom, nobody's gonna be with you, it's just gonna be you. And I'm just like, man, like at that point, you're not challenging me anymore, you're challenging God, you know what I mean? So after that, I was like, okay, like here's an opportunity for God to reveal Himself. So in that game, I prayed, and they finally put me in. And I did good. I did jump cut. I produced for the team in that little amount of time that I was in, and then after that, he started, trying to, kiss up to me and stuff like that. But he ended up getting, fired and stuff like that. But God, yeah. So every time in the meeting room, he would be like, okay, who wants to play music? And he would be expecting like rap and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, I got this Christian rap right here. And then he would be like, give me like a side eye and just like kind of like discourage me from playing it. Or whenever he was gonna like cuss or whatever in a room, he would send me out of the room just because, I was just like some like holy kid, So he ended up getting fired, and God brought a godly coach into my life, into my room. And he was actually the one playing worship music, and he was playing all the same music I was playing. So I'm like, dang, God, like, it's funny how things work, because this first coach got me mentally ready, and this other coach is gonna help me to get physically and like mentally ready in the game field, as far as my plays and my processes and stuff, So after that, COVID year was just where the world shook, where my world shook. My grandma passed COVID year, and that just shook me. And while I was at her funeral, we had a game the next day, and my coach, my position coach, he just came up to me. Him and his wife actually drove in so that they could pick me up from the funeral, and we had to go straight on the plane. I didn't really have any time to like process anything, but I'm just like, I know where my grandma is, and I know that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So I played that game for her, and I had a good game. I had over 100 yards and a touchdown. And then there was a game, ULM. I got hurt, and I got a high MCL sprain, or a high ankle sprain on my right foot the day or the practice before the game. And so I was like, dang, God, like, I don't know what to do right here. Like, should I play, should I not? But I'm like, God, like, you told me that you are God of no limits, but I'm over here putting limits on you. Like, I'm putting limits on the Creator and what He can do in my life. So I went into that game with that mentality of, when I am weak, He is strong. And I ended up scoring 3 touchdowns and rushing for over 130 yards, 120 yards. I'm like, man, God, like, you just keep revealing yourself in my life. And I'm just like, man, like, there's no way I can't trust you. Like, there's no way I can't desire to tell the world about you and try to just, live the same example that you're living for people, So after that, a couple of things started happening this past couple of years where the trials started to come, and I started, to face temptation a lot more, and a lot of things that I've just like never faced before. But in the end, I feel like I was growing through all that. And that's why I brought up that verse, because those trials and tribulations are what got me stronger. Those trials and tribulations are what developed endurance inside of me to trust God, to keep going when things are looking rough, to know that the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is the same Spirit living in each and every one of us. He's the same Spirit living within me. And He's able to do endless amount of things, more things than our minds could even perceive or conceive. That's the same God that we're able to pray to and worship. And you all have that same ability to access the power that He gives. I know this is a sports banquet, but glorify God not only in sports, but as the Bible says, whether you eat or drink, do it all to the glory of God. Not only in sports, but honor your parents, honor the classroom, honor everything. Whatever you do it to your best ability, and you will succeed. So I was thinking, okay, I'm going through all these trials and tribulations, but I must count it all joy. I have to count it all joy, because God can't grow in a comfortable spot. God grows in our uncomfort, in our discomfort, and that's where our faith is oftentimes molded and mended into something great, into something greater. And like Samson, I like to think about it like Samson. Samson, he had all this strength and stuff like that, but he let his temptation and stuff get the best of him, cut his hair, left him weak. So after that, they gouged out his eyes, and they put him in a dark place. They put him in a cell. And there, in that cell, is where he was at his weakest moments. He was at his weakest moments that he'd never been before. So as soon as they knew that they got him, they were preparing a party outside of the temple. So all these people, they were celebrating because they got Samson. They're celebrating, jumping for joy and stuff. But little did they know that Samson was growing in a dark place. It wasn't Samson's hair that gave him strength. It was his heart. It was a heart problem that he had with God. So in that moment, you never know what Samson was doing behind the scenes, whether he was repenting, whether he was, asking God for forgiveness, whatever he was doing beside the scenes, he mended his relationship in that dark place so that when his opportunity came and they brought him up to the stage between the two pillars, he killed more people, more than he ever did in his whole life for the glory of God. So I just think of it, okay, I'm growing in a dark place, but sometimes you have to go through the nightmare to experience a dream. And although you guys are young, I know that, what you guys face now is ultimately going to lead to something great in each and every one of your lives. As long as you guys stay the course, don't give up, don't give up on yourselves, have confidence, and continue running the race that has been placed before you. There's one, do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in a way such to get the prize. 1 Corinthians 9:24. And that's all I have for you guys.